Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. The recording starts with static. Heavy, oppressive static that crackles through dead air for 3 full seconds before a voice breaks through. Houston, we need immediate extraction. The device. It's been transmitting our location for days. The voice belongs to Dr. Calen Mirek, planetary geologist, NASA astronaut, and the man who discovered something humanity was never meant to find. This is the classified account of the Artemis 12 mission to the South Pole-Aitken Basin on the far side of the moon. What you're about to hear has been kept from the public for reasons that will become clear. The mission files were sealed, the crew was debriefed under conditions of national security, and Dr. Mirek himself vanished from public life 6 months after returning to Earth. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and tonight you're going to hear what really happened up there in the darkness of that ancient crater. What they found buried beneath billions of years of lunar dust, and why 3 of the 4 crew members have since disappeared from all public records. This is their story. Let me tell you about Calen Mirek before everything changed. 41 years old in early 2025. Born in Flagstaff, Arizona, to a family of geologists. His father worked at the Lowell Observatory, the same place where Pluto was discovered. His mother taught earth sciences at Northern Arizona University. Calen grew up surrounded by rocks, by people who could read the history of the planet in layers of stone and compressed sediment. He was different from other kids. While they played video games, Calen collected meteorites. While they watched cartoons, he studied maps of the lunar surface. By 16, he could identify dozens of crater formations just from their shape and shadow. By 20, he published his first paper on lunar regolith composition. He spent 15 years with the United States Geological Survey, mapping the moon's surface from satellite data. Thousands of hours staring at radar returns and spectroscopic analysis, learning to see patterns that others missed. He had a gift for reading rock formations, understanding the story that minerals tell about a place's history. Not just what they were, but how they got there. What events shaped them, what secrets they held. NASA noticed. They always notice. In January of 2025, Calen received a call from Johnson Space Center. Not an email, not a form letter. A direct phone call from a senior administrator whose name he'd been told to forget immediately after the conversation ended. They wanted him for a mission, the Artemis 12 lunar expedition, scheduled to launch in March. Destination, the South Pole-Aitken Basin on the far side of the moon. Now, if you know anything about lunar geography, you know what that means. The South Pole-Aitken Basin isn't just another crater. It's the largest impact structure in the entire solar system. 2,500 miles across, 8 miles deep in places. The scar was created over 4 billion years ago, when something massive, something the size of a small planet, struck the moon with enough force to nearly crack it in half. The impact exposed the lunar mantle. It scattered debris across thousands of miles. It fundamentally changed the moon's geology, and possibly its orbit. Scientists have been desperate to explore it properly for decades. But this mission was different. Calen met with the administrator in a windowless conference room in Houston. The man was in his 50s, grey-haired, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. He slid a folder across the table, red stripe across the top. Classification markings Calen had never seen before. Inside were satellite images, lunar reconnaissance orbiter scans from 2023. Deep penetrating radar showing layers of regolith, bedrock, and then something else. something 3 meters down that reflected the radar in ways that lunar geology simply didn't. The readings showed perfect geometric symmetry, unnatural reflectivity, and a faint electromagnetic signature that pulsed at regular intervals. "What am I looking at?" Calen asked. "An anomaly," the administrator said. "Something that shouldn't be there." He pulled out older documents. Apollo mission reports from the 70s. Sub-satellites deployed during those missions had mapped magnetic anomalies in the South Pole-Aitken Basin. Strong magnetic signatures in a region where the moon's crust was magnetically dead. The readings made no sense. They violated everything scientists understood about lunar formation. A follow-up investigation had been proposed in 1974. Then the project was classified. The documents were sealed. The magnetic readings were dismissed as instrument malfunction. And for 50 years, the anomaly sat there in the archives, forgotten. Until that 2023 orbital scan brought it screaming back to life. "We need someone who can analyze this," the administrator said. "Someone who understands exotic samples. Someone who won't panic when the readings don't make sense." Calen stared at the radar images, at that impossible geometric shape buried beneath millions of years of accumulated dust. His hands were shaking slightly. He pressed them flat against the table. "When do we launch?" he asked. The crew assembled over the following months. 4 people for a 30-day surface mission. 4 people who would change the course of human history without knowing it until it was far too late. Mission Commander Esmond Riker was first. 62 years old, career NASA astronaut with 30 years of flight experience, ex-Air Force test pilot who'd flown experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. He'd commanded 4 previous missions to the International Space Station and 2 lunar orbital missions. Riker was old school, by the book, the kind of commander who followed procedures to the letter and expected his crew to do the same. Calen met him in February during crew training. Riker was medium height, compact build, with iron grey hair cut military short. His handshake was firm. His eyes were sharp, the kind that had seen things go wrong at Mach 3 and never flinched. When he looked at you, you got the feeling he was assessing every detail, cataloguing weaknesses, determining if you'd crack under pressure. "You're the rock expert," Riker said, their first conversation in a training simulator at Johnson Space Center. "Planetary geologist," Calen corrected. "Can you handle yourself in a crisis?" "I've done 7 high-altitude expeditions. Ice cores in Greenland at -60 degrees. Volcano sampling in Indonesia, with eruptions happening 2 miles away. I don't panic." Riker nodded slowly. "Good. Because if NASA is sending us to investigate this thing, there's a reason they classified it. And classified usually means dangerous." Dr. Helena Duret came from the European Space Agency, 38 years old, Polish-born, educated in France, trained in Germany. An astrobiologist who specialized in extremophiles, organisms that survived in conditions that would kill anything else. Boiling acid pools in Yellowstone, frozen brine pockets in Antarctic ice sheets, deep ocean thermal vents where the pressure would crush a submarine and the water temperature exceeded 700 degrees. If life could exist in impossible environments, Helena had studied it. If something could survive where nothing should, she'd found it and catalogued it and understood how it worked. She was tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that missed nothing. Sharp features, Eastern European bone structure. She moved with an efficiency that suggested every motion was calculated for purpose. Calen liked her immediately. She asked questions constantly, pushing every assumption, refusing to accept easy answers. During a training session in the neutral buoyancy lab, simulating lunar excavation procedures underwater, Helena pulled Calen aside. "They're not telling us everything," she said quietly. "I've read the mission briefings cover to cover. The official objective is water ice sampling and mineral surveys. Standard geological work. but NASA doesn't classify standard geological missions. Whatever we're looking for, they think it might be biological. On the moon, Calen said, there's no atmosphere, no water. Surface temperatures swing from 400 degrees to negative 400. Nothing could survive there. Nothing from Earth could survive there, Helena corrected. But if something came from somewhere else, if it was designed to withstand vacuum and temperature extremes, if it had biology we don't recognize. She let the implication hang in the air. You think we're looking for alien life? I think NASA wouldn't send an astrobiologist on a routine geology mission, Helena said. I think those magnetic anomalies might be biosignatures. And I think whatever we find down there might still be alive. Omar Quayle was their systems engineer, 45 years old, built like a linebacker, with hands the size of dinner plates and a mind that understood machines better than people, life support, robotics, drilling equipment, power systems, communications arrays. If it had moving parts or circuitry, Omar could fix it, improve it, or completely redesign it in the field, with whatever materials he had available. He kept the International Space Station running during 3 separate critical failures. Once a cooling system rupture that should have forced evacuation. Omar patched it with spare parts from a broken treadmill and kept the station operational for another 6 months. Once a solar panel deployment that jammed and nearly left the station without power. Omar spacewalked for 11 hours straight, manually extending the panel centimetre by centimetre. Once a docking adapter failure that threatened to strand a crew capsule. Omar rebuilt the mechanism using tools he fabricated from aluminum, foil and wire. NASA trusted him with their lives because he'd already saved dozens of them. The 4 of them trained together for 8 weeks. Simulations, emergency procedures, geology and biology protocols. They learned to work as a unit, to anticipate each other's movements, to communicate in the clipped, efficient language of people whose lives depended on precision. And through it all, nobody talked about what they were really going to find. They discussed procedures and contingencies and sample collection methods. But the elephant in the room, the thing nobody wanted to say out loud, was that they were going to the moon to investigate something that might not be natural, something that might have been put there deliberately. Launch day was March 15th, 2025, 6:47 in the morning, Eastern Time. Kennedy Space Center, Launch Complex 39A, the same pad that sent Apollo astronauts to the moon decades earlier. Calen remembered walking out to the launch pad in the pre-dawn darkness, feeling the humid Florida air, seeing the massive Artemis rocket gleaming white against the stars. 220 feet tall, capable of lifting 50 tons to lunar orbit. The most powerful operational rocket on Earth, it stood there like a monument to human ambition, fueled and ready to hurl them across 250,000 miles of empty space. His parents were there in the viewing stands 3 miles away. His father wore his old Lowell Observatory jacket, the one he'd worn when Calen was a kid, visiting the telescope domes. His mother cried when she hugged him goodbye at the crew quarters. They knew this was a classified mission. They knew they couldn't talk about it, but they'd seen the look in Calen's eyes when he came home from training. He'd found something worth risking everything for. The launch was perfect. Textbook. 3 million pounds of thrust driving them off the pad, pressing Calen into his seat with forces that made his chest compress and his vision blur at the edges. 8 minutes to orbit. The world falling away below them, Florida becoming a coastline, becoming a curve of blue and green suspended in black. 3 days to the moon. Calen spent those 3 days staring at the lunar surface through the command module's windows, watching it grow from a distant disk to a vast grey landscape that filled his vision. The near side was familiar, marked by the dark Maria seas and bright crater rays that every human had seen since they first looked up at the night sky. The sea of tranquility where Armstrong walked. The ocean of storms. Tycho crater with its brilliant rays stretching across half the visible hemisphere. But they weren't going to the near side. On day 3, they fired the engines and swung around behind the moon. The moment they crossed into shadow, Earth vanished. Radio contact cut off. They were alone on the far side, in terrain that no human had ever visited, in person. Only 12 people in history had even seen this hemisphere with their own eyes, and all of them had stayed in orbit. Calen and his crew were going down. The South Pole-Aitken Basin spread below them like a frozen ocean of stone. Hills of ancient ejecta material, boulders the size of buildings, crater within crater formations that spoke of billions of years of bombardment, and everywhere that fine grey dust that covered everything on the airless moon. Their landing site was near the basin's centre, in a region of permanent shadow where sunlight hadn't touched the surface in millions of years. Temperatures there dropped to negative 400 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide solid, cold enough to preserve anything perfectly, indefinitely, cold enough that if something had been left there billions of years ago, it would still be exactly as it was the day it was placed. They landed at 2:34 in the afternoon, Houston time, though time meant nothing here. No sunrise, no sunset, just the eternal darkness of shadow broken only by the distant glow of Earth rising over the crater rim 12 miles away. Calen was the second person out. Riker exited first. By protocol, mission commander always sets foot first. Then, Calen descended the ladder, his boots crunching into regolith that hadn't been disturbed since it settled here eons ago. The sound conducted through his suit, a soft crunch that felt wrong in the silence of vacuum. The basin was vast beyond comprehension. Standing on the floor, Calen couldn't see the crater rim in any direction, just hills and ridges and scattered boulders fading into darkness. Their floodlights created small pools of illumination in an ocean of black. Above, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. Below, the ground held secrets that had waited 4 billion years to be discovered. Artemis 12 to Houston, Riker reported. We have landed, beginning base camp setup. The response took nearly 3 seconds, the speed of light delay from Moon to Earth and back. Copy, Artemis 12. Congratulations on successful landing. You are go for surface operations. They spent the first day assembling their habitat. 3 connected modules that would serve as living quarters, laboratory, and equipment storage. Solar panels positioned to collect the faint sunlight reflecting off the crater rim. Power cells that would keep them alive in the darkness. Life support systems that would recycle their air and water for 30 days. Day 2 was systems checks and equipment testing, making sure the drills worked in lunar conditions. Calibrating the subsurface radar. Running test cores to verify their instruments gave accurate readings. Everything worked. Everything was nominal. NASA had planned this mission with obsessive attention to detail. Day 3, Calen began his geological survey. He collected surface samples from a half-mile radius around base camp, working methodically, cataloguing everything. Every sample told the same story. Ancient regolith, pulverized rock from billions of years of micrometeorite impacts. Impact glass formed when asteroids struck with enough force to melt the surface. Normal lunar geology. Exactly what he expected to find. But 300 meters northeast, the radar showed something different. It was subtle. Most geologists would have missed it. A slightly denser layer at depth, roughly 3 meters below the surface. The radar echo came back sharper than it should, with a distinctive signature that suggested metal. But not just metal, refined metal, processed metal. Metal that had been shaped and formed, rather than naturally deposited. Natural metal deposits existed on the moon. Iron-nickel meteorites occasionally struck the surface and buried themselves. But this reading was different. Too uniform. Too geometrically precise. Too perfectly horizontal in a landscape where nothing was level. Calen marked the location and returned to base camp. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking slightly inside his gloves. He'd spent 15 years studying lunar samples and satellite data. He knew what natural looked like. This wasn't natural. "I want to drill there tomorrow," he told Riker that evening. They were in the habitat's main module, still wearing their suits but with helmets off. The recycled air smelled of dust and equipment and 4 people living in close quarters. "What did you find?" Riker asked. "Maybe nothing. Probably nothing. But the radar signature is unusual. Not consistent with known lunar geology. I want to see what's down there." Riker studied him for a long moment. "You think it's the anomaly? The thing NASA sent us to find?" "I think it might be. The location matches the coordinates from the 2023 orbital scan. The depth matches. The radar signature matches." Calen paused. "I think we found it on day 3. "Then we drill," Riker decided, "day 6. That gives us time to prep properly, to make sure our equipment is functioning perfectly, to plan our approach." He looked at each of them. "If this is what NASA sent us here to find, we do it right. We document everything, we follow every protocol, and we stay safe." Day 4 was equipment preparation. Day 5 was a rest day mandated by mission protocols. They couldn't work 7 days straight, even on the moon. The human body and mind needed downtime, needed time to process, to recover. Calen spent his rest day staring at the radar data, studying that anomaly, trying to understand what it might be. The readings showed a horizontal layer, approximately 10 meters across, perfectly level 3 meters down, with electromagnetic properties that didn't match any known lunar material. He couldn't sleep that night, lay in his sleeping bag, listening to the quiet hum of life support systems, thinking about what they might find, what it might mean, what it could tell them about who or what had visited the moon billions of years ago. Day 6 was March 21st, the day everything changed. Calen and Omar drove the pressurized rover to the drill site just after breakfast. The rover was their mobile base, about the size of a large van, with its own life support and power systems. Inside, they could work without suits, operating the drilling equipment through a control panel, while staying protected from the vacuum and temperature extremes. The drill rig itself was mounted on the rover's back, a 20-foot telescoping arm with a carbide bit capable of grinding through solid basalt. They positioned the rig over the target coordinates, extended the arm, and started drilling. The first meter went smoothly, loose regolith, compressed slightly with depth, but still easy to penetrate. The drill core sample came up grey and dusty, exactly what Calen expected. Billions of years of pulverized rock, accumulated one microscopic layer at a time. The second meter was denser, compacted material from millions of years of accumulation. The drill slowed but kept advancing steadily, the carbide bit chewing through lunar soil that hadn't been disturbed since the dinosaurs walked the Earth. At 2.8 meters, the drill hit resistance. Not the gradual resistance of harder rock. Not the expected resistance of bedrock. Sudden resistance. Complete resistance. The drill bit spun against something that wouldn't give at all. Something that stopped the drill as effectively as if they'd hit solid steel. "Omar, stop," Calen said. "Pull the core." Omar retracted the drill carefully, watching the tension readings to make sure nothing snapped. When the core sample emerged, Calen felt his heart rate spike. His breathing accelerated. His hands moved, without conscious thought, reaching for the sample. The drill bit had scraped against metal, not a chunk of meteorite, not a random piece of nickel iron from an ancient impact. A smooth metallic seam that ran horizontally across the core sample, perfectly level, perfectly smooth, machine smooth, polished smooth, impossible smooth. Calen had spent 15 years studying lunar samples. He knew every type of rock, every mineral composition, every natural metal formation. He'd analysed thousands of meteorite fragments, dozens of asteroid samples, countless pieces of lunar bedrock. This was none of those things. The seam was too perfect, too precise. Natural processes didn't create edges this sharp, didn't create surfaces this smooth, didn't create horizontal layers this geometrically exact. "Get this back to the lab," Calen said. His voice was steady, controlled, professional. But inside, his mind was racing. His thoughts were scattered. Everything he'd believed about the moon, about Earth's place in the universe, about humanity's uniqueness, was crumbling. Now. Back at base camp, in the Habitat's laboratory module, Calen ran every test they had. Spectrographic analysis showed the metal was an alloy. Nickel, iron, and something else. Elements his equipment couldn't quite identify. The absorption spectrum didn't match anything in the reference database. There were spectral lines where there shouldn't be any. Gaps where there should be lines. A signature that suggested this metal had been formed under conditions that didn't exist in the solar system. Crystalline structure analysis showed an atomic lattice that was too perfect, too regular. Natural metals had flaws, impurities, irregularities from their formation process. Atoms didn't arrange themselves in perfect grids. There were always dislocations, grain boundaries, microscopic defects. This metal looked designed at the molecular level. Engineered. Constructed atom by atom with precision that human technology couldn't match. Isotopic composition was where things got truly strange. Every element has isotopes, variations with different numbers of neutrons in the nucleus. The ratio between isotopes depends on where and when the element formed. Solar system materials all showed similar isotope ratios because they condensed from the same primordial cloud that created the sun and planets 4.5 billion years ago. This metal's isotope ratios were wrong. The neutron balance didn't match solar system composition. The atomic weights were shifted in ways that suggested formation in a completely different stellar environment. This material hadn't formed from the same cosmic dust that created everything humans had ever studied. It came from somewhere else, another star system, another region of the galaxy, another set of nuclear processes that produced different isotope balances. It was interstellar. Calen sat in the lab for a long time, staring at the readouts, checking and rechecking his calculations, running the tests again with different parameters, calibrating his equipment to make sure there were no errors, getting the same impossible results every single time. Finally, he went to find Riker. The mission commander was in the Habitat's main module, reviewing the next day's schedule on a tablet. He looked up when Calen entered. Something in Calen's expression made him set the tablet aside immediately. "The metal," Calen said. His voice was quiet, controlled. There was an undercurrent of something else, wonder, fear, disbelief. "It's not from the solar system." Riker stood up slowly. "Explain." Calen pulled up the isotope analysis on a wall monitor. "Every natural material we've ever found, from Earth, the Moon, Mars, asteroids, meteorites, comets, everything shares common isotope ratios. Because it all formed from the same source, the same molecular cloud that collapsed to form our solar system. This metal is different. The ratios are shifted. The nuclear signatures are wrong. This didn't form here." "So it's interstellar?" Helena had entered the module without them noticing. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her suit from outside work. A piece of another star system, maybe from a comet that originated outside the solar system. "Interstellar comets don't bury themselves 3 meters underground," Calen said, "and they don't create perfectly horizontal seams, and they definitely don't show signs of being processed and refined." He paused. "This metal was manufactured, formed into a specific shape, placed here deliberately." Manufactured by what? Riker's voice was hard. Or by whom? Helena added quietly. The implication hung in the air. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Outside, through the small windows, Earth hung in the black sky like a reminder of home, of the world they'd left behind. The world that had no idea what they'd just discovered. Finally, Omar's voice came over the comm. He was still in the rover, parked at the drill site. If that metal is manufactured, and it's buried 3 meters down, then whatever put it there did it a long time ago. The moon accumulates dust slowly, a millimeter every 10,000 years or so from micrometeorite impacts. 3 meters means 3 million years minimum, Calen finished. But probably much longer. The regolith at that depth is heavily compacted. Based on the compression ratios and the helium-3 content, my preliminary estimate is closer to 300 million years, maybe more. 300 million years ago, Earth was in the Carboniferous period. Giant insects, swamp forests, the first reptiles just beginning to evolve. Nothing remotely intelligent, nothing capable of space travel or tool use or complex thought. And something had been here, had come to the moon, had buried metal beneath the surface and left. "We need to excavate," Helena said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with barely contained excitement. "Carefully, without contaminating the site. We need to see what we're dealing with. Is it just a piece of metal, or is there more? Is it a fragment of something larger, or is it intact? We need to know." Riker was quiet for a long moment, thinking, calculating, weighing the scientific value against the potential risks. Finally, he nodded. "We'll use the crawler, remote excavation, pressurized cabin to keep dust away from the site. Minimal disturbance, maximum documentation." He looked at each of them. "How long?" 8 hours, Calen estimated. Maybe 10 if we're being extremely careful, which we should be. "Then we start tomorrow," Riker decided. "Helena, prep the contamination protocols. Omar, get the crawler ready. Calen, plan the excavation strategy. I'll inform Houston." That conversation with Mission Control must have been interesting. Calen wasn't privy to it. Classified channel, commander-only communication. But when Riker emerged from the communications module an hour later, his face was grim and his jaw was set. "Houston says proceed," was all he told them. "But we document everything, every step, every sample, every measurement. They want a complete record." They worked late into the night, planning. Calen drew up excavation grids, marking where to dig and in what order. Helena prepared sterile containers for samples. Omar checked and rechecked the crawler's systems, making sure every manipulator, arm and camera feed functioned perfectly. None of them slept well that night. They started the excavation at 8:15 the next morning. The crawler was a small robotic vehicle, about the size of a golf cart. It had a sealed, pressurized cabin where one person could sit and operate the controls manually, if needed, plus manipulator arms for delicate work and larger excavation arms for moving regolith. Omar piloted it remotely from the rover, watching through multiple cameras, while Calen directed the operation from beside him. The process was painfully slow. Scrape away 5 centimeters of dust. Scan the newly exposed surface with ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors. Document everything with photographs and measurements. Repeat. Each cycle took 15 minutes. There were dozens of cycles. After 4 hours, they'd exposed an area about 10 feet across. The metal seam ran through all of it, perfectly straight, perfectly level, perfectly preserved, beneath billions of years of accumulated dust. After 6 hours, they found the edge. The metal curved downward, forming what looked like a rim or lip. Calen's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a buried fragment. This was something with shape, with purpose, with design. After 8 hours, they'd cleared enough regolith to see the full structure. A hatch, It was circular, roughly 10 feet in diameter, made from that same strange alloy. The surface was smooth but not polished, with a matte finish that seemed to absorb their lights rather than reflect them. No symbols, no markings, no text or diagrams or anything that suggested origin or purpose. No visible seams or rivets or any indication of how it had been constructed. Just a manufactured object buried beneath the lunar surface. A door, an entrance, a portal to something below. Calen stood at the rim of the excavation pit, staring down at it through his helmet visor. His mind was racing, trying to process what he was seeing. His breath was coming fast, fogging the inside of his helmet slightly despite the defoggers. This was real. This was actually real. Something had come here, had built this, had buried it and left. And now, billions of years later, humans had found it. "How old?" Helena asked quietly. She stood beside him, her helmet almost touching his. "I need to date the surrounding material," Calen said, "but based on the regolith depth and compaction, based on the accumulation rates and the compression ratios." He paused, doing the calculations in his head. "I'd estimate the object has been here for a very, very long time. Hundreds of millions of years at minimum, possibly billions." He spent the next 2 hours collecting dust samples from the edges where the hatch met the surrounding material. Material that had accumulated after the object was buried. Material that would tell him exactly how long it had been here, how long it had waited to be found. Back in the lab, he prepared the samples for helium-3 isotope dating. Helium-3 is rare on Earth, but common on the Moon. It's created when solar wind particles strike the lunar surface and become embedded in the regolith. The longer dust is exposed to solar wind, the more helium-3 it accumulates. By measuring the concentration, you can determine how long the material has been sitting on the surface, exposed to space. Calen ran the analysis 3 times, using different samples from different locations around the hatch. Each time, he got the same result. Each time, the number made his hands shake. 2.8 billion years. He sat at the lab bench, staring at the readout, unable to move, unable to think, unable to process what that number meant. 2.8 billion years ago, Earth was a completely different planet. The continents were still forming, grinding together and tearing apart in endless cycles. The atmosphere was mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide, with barely any oxygen. The most complex life forms were bacterial mats in shallow seas. Nothing lived on land. Nothing had eyes or brains or bones or any of the features that would later define complex life. The Moon was different too, closer to Earth by thousands of miles, spinning faster, subject to stronger tidal forces and more frequent asteroid impacts. The solar system was younger, more chaotic, still settling into its current configuration. And something had come here, something intelligent, something technological, something that built a hatch and buried it under what would eventually become 3 meters of accumulated dust. Something that left it here to wait, to endure, to survive across timescales that made human civilization look like an eye blink. What could possibly warrant that kind of planning? That kind of engineering? That kind of patience? Calen found Riker in the Habitat's sleeping module, reviewing mission logs before bed. The commander looked up when Calen entered. 2.8 billion years, Calen said without preamble. The hatch has been here for 2.8 billion years. Riker stared at him for a long moment, processing, calculating, understanding the implications. "You're certain?" "As certain as isotope dating can make me. The method has error bars, but they're small. We're definitely talking billions of years, not millions. This object predates most life on Earth by over 1 billion years." "That's older than complex life on Earth." "Older than complex life by over 1 billion years," Calen corrected. "When this was placed here, Earth was a bacterial soup, The most advanced organisms were single-celled. Nothing had even invented photosynthesis yet. This hatch is older than algae. Riker stood up slowly. He walked to the small window and stared out at the lunar landscape, at Earth hanging in the black sky, at the stars beyond. "Then we need to see what's under it," he said finally. "If this is just a hatch, there's something below. A chamber, a facility, a structure of some kind. Something that's been waiting here for billions of years." He turned to face Calen. "I'm opening it tomorrow. That's what we came here to do." That night, Calen couldn't sleep. He lay in his sleeping bag in the darkened sleeping module, listening to the quiet hum of life support systems, listening to Omar snoring softly, listening to his own thoughts echoing in his head. He thought about the hatch, about something crossing the unimaginable distance between stars, about it arriving here when Earth was still geologically young, when life was just beginning, when nothing existed that could understand what it was or why it had come. Why? What could possibly make a journey like that worthwhile? What could motivate a civilization to travel between stars and leave something behind on a dead moon? And what were they about to unleash? Day 8 was March 23rd. They spent the morning studying the hatch, looking for any mechanism to open it. Omar scanned it with ground-penetrating radar, with metal detectors, with electromagnetic sensors. The hatch was solid except for a small area near one edge, a recess barely visible even in direct light, about the size of a quarter. It was recessed about 2 centimeters into the surface, perfectly circular, with a slightly different texture than the surrounding metal. "Pressure plate," Omar suggested. He was kneeling beside the hatch, examining the recess through his helmet visor. "Could be," Calen said, "or a biometric scanner, or a proximity sensor, or something we don't have a concept for." He paused. "Only one way to find out." Riker knelt beside the recess. He reached down with his gloved hand, the bulky EVA glove making fine motor control difficult. He positioned his finger over the recess. "Everyone ready?" he asked. They were arranged around the hatch. Calen to one side with multiple cameras recording. Helena on the opposite side with scientific instruments ready. Omar at the rover, monitoring everything remotely and ready to pull them out if something went wrong. "Ready," they confirmed. Riker pressed. For a moment, nothing happened. Just silence and stillness, and 4 people holding their breath inside their suits. Then Calen felt it through his boots. A vibration, subtle but unmistakable. Something mechanical activating beneath them. Something that had been dormant for billions of years, suddenly waking up. The hatch began to open. Not sliding, not lifting, spiraling. The metal surface rotated, sections moving past each other, in a pattern too complex to follow. Like a camera aperture opening, the circular hatch separated into segments that retracted into the surrounding rim. The motion was smooth, controlled, precise. No jerking or hesitation or sign that the mechanisms had degraded over eons. Whatever built this had built it to last forever. The whole process took about 30 seconds. When it finished, they were looking down into darkness, complete darkness that their helmet lights couldn't quite penetrate. The beam seemed to be absorbed rather than reflected, as if the darkness itself was swallowing the light. "Atmospheric reading?" Riker asked. His voice was steady, but Calen could hear the underlying tension. Omar checked his instruments from the rover. Near vacuum pressure is 0.03 millibars, essentially the same as the lunar surface. Whatever was down there, it's been exposed to space for a very long time. "Life signs?" "Negative. No movement. No heat signatures above background. No electromagnetic emissions that I can detect from here." "Radiation?" "Background only. Normal cosmic ray exposure. Nothing unusual." Riker stared into the darkness for a long moment. Then he clipped a safety line to his suit and looked at Calen. "We go down. You and me. Helena, Omar, stay topside and monitor. If anything happens, if we lose communication for more than 60 seconds, you pull us up immediately. No discussion." "Understood," Helena said. Calen clipped his own safety line and approached the edge of the shaft. His helmet light swept across the opening, revealing smooth walls that descended into shadow. He could see what looked like ladder rungs built into one wall, perfectly spaced, each one about a foot apart. The descent ladder was integrated into the structure, not added later, not attached, built in, as if whoever designed this had known humans would eventually find it and would need a way down. That thought was more disturbing than the darkness. Calen was the first to descend. He gripped the first rung carefully, testing its strength. The metal was cold, even through his gloves, conducting heat away from his suit, but it held, solid, unchanged by billions of years. He climbed down slowly, counting rungs. 5, 10, 15. His helmet lights created moving pools of illumination on the smooth walls. The walls looked machined, not drilled. Perfect cylinders with a diameter just wide enough for a suited human to descend comfortably. Again that disturbing thought. Built for humans, or built for something humanoid. Something bipedal. Something roughly the same size and shape as the species that would eventually evolve on the planet hanging in the sky above. 20 rungs, 25, 30. At 43 rungs, approximately 15 feet down, the shaft opened into a chamber. Calen stepped off the ladder and onto a solid floor. His boots made no sound in the vacuum, but he felt the contact through his suit. Felt solid ground beneath him. Felt stable footing in a structure that shouldn't exist. Riker descended behind him, moving carefully, methodically. When both of them were standing on the floor, they raised their helmet lights and looked around. The chamber was larger than Calen expected, about 40 feet long, 15 feet wide, 12 feet high, roughly the size of a subway car or a small house. The proportions were strange, slightly off from what human architects would design, but not so alien that it felt completely foreign. The walls were lined with panels that looked like black volcanic glass, but felt wrong when Calen touched them. Too smooth, too uniform, too perfect. These weren't natural formations. They were manufactured, installed, part of an integrated system. The floor was covered in fine dust, undisturbed for billions of years. His boots left prints, the first marks in this space since it was sealed. The dust patterns would tell a story to future investigators, if there were any. They'd see where humans walked, where they paused, where they studied the structure, and in the center of the chamber stood the machine. Calen's first thought was that it looked ordinary. Disappointingly ordinary. Not alien. Not bizarre. Not covered in symbols or lights or anything that screamed extraterrestrial technology. Just a cylindrical structure, about 12 feet tall and 4 feet in diameter. The surface looked like brushed metal, dull grey, with a texture that suggested extreme age, but no visible corrosion or degradation. No lights, no displays, no buttons or switches or screens or anything that looked like a control interface. Just a featureless cylinder sitting in the middle of an ancient chamber, as silent and still as a tombstone. "Omar, Helena, we're in," Riker reported over the comm. "Sending video now." Calen circled the machine slowly, documenting it from every angle. His helmet cameras recorded everything. Every detail, every surface feature, every dimension. The machine was perfectly symmetrical. No variation from one side to another. No obvious front or back or top or bottom. Just perfect geometric uniformity. "What is it?" Helena asked over the comm. Her voice had an edge of excitement barely contained. "Unknown," Calen said. "It appears to be some kind of cylindrical structure. No obvious power source, no visible mechanisms, no markings or text, just smooth metal." He approached closer, scanning with his instruments. The metal was dense, very dense. His radar reading suggested it was solid, not hollow, which made no sense for its size. A solid metal cylinder, that large, should weigh dozens of tons. How had it been transported here? How had it been lowered into this chamber? Unless it had been built here, assembled in place, or manufactured using processes that didn't require traditional construction methods. Radiation? Riker asked. Calen checked his dosimeter. Background only. No, wait. The reading had changed. A small spike, then another. I'm seeing particle emission. Very weak. Exotic particles that my equipment doesn't recognize. Step back, Riker ordered immediately. Calen moved away from the cylinder. The readings dropped to background levels immediately. It's emitting something, Calen reported. Only when I'm close, within about 3 feet. Like it's responding to presence. They spent the next hour documenting the chamber. Calen examined the walls and found they weren't just decorative panels. There were channels running through them, pathways that suggested fluid or energy distribution. A circulatory system built into the structure itself. The channels converged at nodes, creating junction points in a network that covered all 4 walls, and all of them led to the floor, to the point where the floor met the machine. It's a power system, Calen said, tracing the pathways with his gloved hand. The walls collect energy somehow. The channels distribute it through the network. Everything feeds to the machine. This entire chamber is designed as an energy collection and distribution system. Collecting energy from what? Helena asked over the comm. Unknown. Maybe electromagnetic fields from space. Maybe cosmic radiation. Maybe particle impacts from solar wind. Maybe something we don't understand. But the design is clear. The chamber collects, the walls conduct, the machine receives. The floor wasn't level, Calen noticed. It sloped very gently towards the center, towards the machine. Maybe 1 degree of inclination. Almost imperceptible, but definitely there. Drainage? Heat dispersion? Or something else. He collected dust samples from various points around the chamber. The dust composition was identical to lunar regolith. Pulverized rock. Impact glass. Tiny meteorite fragments. Nothing unusual except its presence here, inside a sealed chamber that should have been pristine. Which meant the chamber hadn't always been sealed. At some point, lunar dust had entered, had accumulated on the floor. Then, the chamber had been closed, sealing the dust inside for billions of years. Why? Calen examined the machine even more carefully, looking for any access panels or seams or signs of internal structure. He found nothing. The surface was seamless, perfectly continuous. No joints or welds or attachment points. He tried to scrape a sample from the metal using a diamond-tipped tool. The tool slid across the surface without leaving a mark. He pressed harder. Still nothing. Whatever the machine was made of, it was harder than anything in his toolkit. After 3 hours in the chamber, Riker called them back to the surface. We need to analyze what we've got, plan our next steps. This is too important to rush. They climbed the ladder slowly, Calen first, then Riker. Back to the lunar surface, back to the familiar barren landscape. The hatch remained open behind them, a dark circle in the regolith, a portal to mysteries that had waited billions of years to be discovered. Back in the habitat, they spread their findings across every available surface. Helena examined the dust samples under microscope, looking for any sign of biological material or organic compounds. Calen ran spectrographic analysis on the wall scrapings, trying to understand the material composition. Omar studied the video footage, looking for details they'd missed during the exploration. The dust from the chamber floor was billions of years old. Helium-3 dating confirmed it matched the age of the hatch, approximately 2.8 billion years. This chamber had been sealed since then, protecting its contents from the harsh lunar environment outside. The wall panels were a composite material, unlike anything Calen had seen before. Part metal, part ceramic, part something his instruments couldn't identify. structured at a microscopic level that suggested manufacturing techniques far beyond human capability. The channels weren't carved or drilled into the material. They were integral to it, built in during fabrication, designed at the molecular level. Most disturbing were the exotic particles his radiation monitor had detected. Omar analysed the data late into the night, running calculations, comparing signatures, trying to identify what they were. Finally, around midnight, he called the others to look at his findings. "These particles," Omar said slowly. He looked exhausted. They all did, but his eyes were bright with concern. "They don't match any known radiation. Not alpha particles, not beta, not gamma rays, not neutrons or protons, or any of the standard decay products. The energy signature is wrong. The mass is wrong. The decay pattern doesn't fit any model we have." "Could it be dangerous?" Riker asked. "I don't know. The emission level is so weak that immediate danger seems unlikely. But I don't understand what these particles are or what they do. They might be completely harmless, or they might have effects we can't measure with our equipment." "Could it be a power source?" Helena suggested. "Some kind of exotic matter that slowly decays and releases energy?" "Maybe," Omar said. "Or maybe it's a byproduct of whatever the machine does, like heat from a light bulb or exhaust from an engine. We detect the emission, but we don't understand the underlying process." They discussed the machine's purpose late into the night. Helena thought it might be an automated system, something left behind to perform a specific function. Maybe a probe gathering data about the solar system. Maybe a relay station for communication. Maybe a marker declaring territorial claims. Omar suggested it could be a repository, a storage system for information or materials, a time capsule left by a civilization that wanted to leave something behind, a message to whoever eventually found it. Calen wondered if it was a warning, a beacon broadcasting danger or stay away, or some concept they didn't understand. Maybe this region of space was marked as hazardous. Maybe the machine was protecting Earth from something, or maybe it was calling something here. Riker was more concerned about practical matters. It's been here for billions of years. It's survived temperature extremes, radiation bombardment, countless asteroid impacts. Something that durable doesn't happen by accident. It was built to last, built to survive, built to keep functioning no matter what happens. "Which means it's probably still functional," Calen said quietly. "Which means," Riker corrected, "that we need to determine if it poses a direct threat to this mission, or to Earth. That's our priority. Understanding can come later. Safety comes first." They spent the next 2 days conducting detailed examinations of the chamber and the machine. They descended multiple times, staying longer each visit, growing more comfortable in that ancient space. They mapped every surface, documented every feature, collected samples of everything they could safely remove. The machine never changed, never moved, never lit up or made sound or gave any indication it was anything more than a dead relic. Just that faint emission of exotic particles when someone approached. Just that subtle vibration Calen thought he felt through his boots, though the seismic monitors showed nothing. On day 9, March 24th, everything changed. Calen was in the Habitat's lab, analysing more dust samples, when his radiation monitor chirped. Not an alarm, just a notification, a change in background levels. He glanced at the readout absently, expecting normal fluctuation. Then he looked again, his attention snapping into focus. Exotic particle emission, stronger than before, much stronger. And he wasn't in the chamber. He was in the habitat, over 300 meters from the excavation site. "Omar," Calen said carefully. His voice was steady, but his pulse was accelerating. "Check your radiation monitors. Tell me what you see." A pause, then Omar's voice, tight with concern. "Particle emission just increased by a factor of 10. Source bearing is consistent with the excavation site. The machine is emitting at higher levels." Why? Helena had entered the lab, drawn by the tone of their voices. Her face was pale. What triggered it? I don't know, Calen said. We haven't been near it for 12 hours. We haven't done anything different. It just started emitting on its own. Riker joined them, already pulling up instrument displays on his tablet. Houston is asking about increased electromagnetic readings. They're detecting something from lunar orbit, strong enough that their instruments picked it up from the command module. The command module was their ride home, orbiting the moon automatically while they worked on the surface. It carried sensitive instruments for monitoring surface conditions. If those instruments could detect the emission from orbit, that meant the machine was broadcasting at significant power levels. The satellite, Omar said suddenly. He was at the main console, checking communication systems. Our relay satellite is having problems. Intermittent signal loss. Communication disruption. Their relay satellite orbited the moon, maintaining constant contact between the Farside base and Earth. It had worked perfectly for 8 days, providing reliable communication across 250,000 miles of space. Now it was failing. What kind of disruption? Riker demanded. Dropouts. Started about 10 minutes ago. Signal cuts out for 30 seconds, then comes back. Now it's up to 45 seconds. Getting worse. Omar's fingers flew across the console, running diagnostics. When it comes back online, some systems are corrupted. Telemetry showing errors. Data packets failing. Electromagnetic interference, Calen said. His mind was racing, connecting pieces. The machine is generating an electromagnetic field, strong enough to disrupt equipment from 300 meters away, strong enough to affect satellites in orbit. Why now? Helena asked. What changed? What triggered it? They spent the next hour monitoring the readings. The particle emissions continued, rising gradually, not spiking, not fluctuating, just steadily increasing like a motor spinning up to speed. The satellite disruptions got worse, 2-minute dropouts, 5-minute dropouts. Each time it reconnected, more systems were affected. By mid-afternoon, they'd lost visual telemetry entirely. The satellite could still relay voice communication, but the video feed was permanently corrupted. Static and digital artifacts. Mission Control was getting worried. So was Calen. He pulled up his survey data, the maps he'd made of the excavation site and the surrounding terrain. Then he overlaid them with gravitational data from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, magnetic field readings from the old Apollo subsatellites, orbital mechanics calculations showing the Earth-Moon system dynamics. The chamber's location wasn't random. He'd noticed this before, but hadn't understood the implications. Now, with the machine activating, the significance became clear. The chamber sat at the L1 Lagrange point for the Earth-Moon system, the point where gravitational forces between Earth and Moon balanced perfectly, a position that remained stable as the Moon orbited Earth, a location where gravitational potential energy reached a specific value, neither pulling toward Earth nor Moon, but suspended between them. It's using gravitational fields, Calen said aloud. The realization was forming as he spoke. The machine is positioned at a gravitational equilibrium point. It's drawing power from the Earth-Moon gravitational interaction, the tidal forces, the way the two bodies pull on each other. That's not possible, Omar objected. Gravitational fields don't generate power. They're conservative fields. You can't extract energy from them without expending equal energy somewhere else. Unless your technology is advanced enough, Calen countered. Unless you understand physics we haven't discovered yet. Unless you can tap into quantum effects or dark energy or something we don't even have names for. He pointed to his maps. Look at the precision. The chamber is positioned to within meters of the optimal point. That level of accuracy isn't accidental. It's engineered. If it's drawing power from gravitational fields, Helena said slowly, then its power source is effectively unlimited. Tidal forces between Earth and Moon aren't going anywhere. They'll exist as long as both bodies do. The machine could run forever. That thought hung in the air, heavy and ominous. A machine that could run forever, that could wait billions of years and still function. That was waking up now, after sitting dormant since before complex life evolved on Earth. Why? What was it waiting for? What conditions needed to be met before it activated? "We need to determine if this poses a threat," Riker said, his commander voice hard and certain. "I want continuous monitoring, all instruments focused on the excavation site, and I want options for shutting it down if necessary." "How do you shut down something we don't understand?" Omar asked. "By breaking it," Riker said simply. "If it becomes dangerous, we damage it, physically. We use the drilling equipment or the rover or whatever we have to smash that machine into pieces." "That could make things worse," Helena warned. "We don't know what happens if we damage it. Could trigger a defense system, could release stored energy, could activate something we haven't seen yet. Or it could save Earth," Riker countered. "If that thing is doing something harmful, we stop it, by any means necessary. That's the mission." They worked through the evening, monitoring the machine's emissions, watching the satellite deteriorate, trying to understand what was happening. The exotic particles continued to increase. The electromagnetic interference got stronger, and deep in Calen's gut, a sense of dread was building. Something was wrong. Something was changing. The machine wasn't just waking up randomly. It was responding to something, following a program, executing instructions that had been coded into it billions of years ago. At 11:47 p.m. Houston time, Calen noticed something else. He was reviewing astronomical data, checking orbital positions, when he saw it, a pattern in the calendar, a conjunction of events. "There's a lunar eclipse scheduled," he said quietly. The words felt heavy, significant. "Day after tomorrow, March 28th, total eclipse. Earth will move directly between the sun and moon." Riker turned to look at him. And during the eclipse, Earth, moon and sun will align perfectly. 3 massive bodies in a straight line. The gravitational forces at the L1 point will reach maximum. If the machine uses gravitational potential as a power source, if it's designed to activate during specific alignments. He didn't need to finish. They all understood. The machine wasn't waking up randomly. It was waking up on schedule. A schedule set billions of years ago, key to celestial mechanics that were predictable and precise. The alignment was coming. The machine was preparing, and they were going to be here when it reached full activation. "How long until the eclipse?" Helena asked. Calen checked his calculations. 41 hours. Starts at 3:22 p.m. Houston time on the 28th. Totality begins at 4:17 p.m. and lasts for 73 minutes. "Then we have 41 hours to decide what to do," Riker said. "We can wait and observe, document what happens during the eclipse, maybe learn what the machine is designed to do." "Or we leave," Omar said quietly. "Pack up, launch before the alignment, get back to orbit in safety before whatever's going to happen happens." "Or we shut it down," Riker added, "before the eclipse, before it reaches full power. We go down there and we break that machine before it can complete whatever process it's running." They debated late into the night. The scientist in Calen wanted to stay, to observe, to document humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial technology at a pivotal moment. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, of 1,000 lifetimes. They couldn't just walk away. But the human in him was afraid. Genuinely afraid. They had no idea what the machine would do at full power. No idea if it was designed to observe, or communicate, or transform, or destroy. No idea if witnessing its activation would be the greatest discovery in human history, or the last mistake humanity ever made. Finally, Riker made the decision. "We leave. Tomorrow we start packing. We launch the next evening, before the eclipse begins. We get to orbit, we get to safety, and we let NASA figure out the next steps." "Commander," Calen started to object. That's an order, Riker cut him off. This is first contact protocol. When facing unknown alien technology exhibiting active behavior, crew safety takes priority. We've documented everything, collected samples, gathered enough data for decades of analysis. Now we report our findings and let people smarter than us determine how to proceed. What if there's no time for that? Helena asked quietly. What if the machine does whatever it's designed to do during the eclipse and then goes dormant again for another billion years? We'd lose the only chance to observe it active. Then we lose it, Riker said firmly. Better to lose scientific opportunity than to lose crew members, or worse. They packed through the night and into the next morning. Equipment, samples, data storage devices containing terabytes of video, images and sensor readings. They loaded everything essential into the lander, securing it for the journey home. But there was one problem they couldn't ignore. The chamber was still open, the hatch unsealed, and NASA protocols were clear. No contamination of extraterrestrial sites. Everything had to be secured before departure. The site had to be left as close to its original condition as possible. They had to close the hatch. On the morning of day 12, March 27th, they attempted to seal the chamber. Omar piloted the crawler remotely, approaching the excavation site carefully. The plan was simple. Use the crawler's manipulator arm to press the recessed plate, reverse the opening process, let the hatch spiral closed again. The crawler made it within 50 feet of the site before its system shut down. Not gradually, not with warning alarms or degraded performance. Instantly, completely. Every system went dark simultaneously. Power, control, communication. Everything died at once. Omar tried every reset procedure in the manual. Hard reboot. Emergency power bypass. Manual overrides. Nothing worked. The crawler sat motionless in the lunar regolith, as dead as if someone had flipped a switch and turned it off. Electromagnetic interference, Omar diagnosed. Frustration and worry mixing in his voice. The field is too strong now. Anything electronic that gets close just shuts down. Completely overwhelmed. They tried approaching on foot. Calen and Riker suited up and walked toward the excavation site, carrying portable instruments to measure the interference levels. At 100 feet, their suit displays started flickering. At 75 feet, their comm systems began cutting out. At 50 feet, where the crawler had died, Riker called a halt. "We can't close it," he said. The admission clearly bothered him. "We don't have the equipment to work in that electromagnetic environment. Everything we have relies on electronics, and electronics don't function near the machine anymore." "We could try manually," Calen suggested. "Use the crawler's mechanical controls. No electronics, just hydraulics and levers." "The crawler's hydraulics need power," Omar pointed out. "We'd have to be inside it, operating the manual controls, which means getting within the interference zone." "I'll do it," Calen said. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. "Get me in the crawler before we approach. Seal the cabin. I'll use the manual controls to get close enough to close the hatch." Riker studied him for a long moment. "That's dangerous. If the crawler dies while you're inside, you'd have to walk back. Your suit might not function properly." "Then I walk back," Calen said simply. "It's 300 meters. I can make it." They spent 2 hours planning the attempt. Omar briefed Calen on the manual control systems, showing him which levers operated which functions. The crawler had backup hydraulic controls designed for use if the electronic systems failed. They were crude compared to the computer-assisted controls, but they worked. Helena checked and rechecked Calen's suit systems, making sure every backup was functional. His air supply was full. His battery was charged. His thermal regulation was operating perfectly. If he had to walk back through the interference zone, his suit should keep him alive long enough to reach safety. Should. Probably. Most likely, not guarantees, just hopes. At 2:30 p.m, Calen climbed into the crawler's small cabin. The space was cramped, barely large enough for a suited human. He sealed the hatch and gave a thumbs up through the window. "Com check," he said. "Reading you," Omar confirmed. "I'm switching you to manual control now. Green lever is forward drive, red lever is reverse. Blue handles control the manipulator arms." Calen tested each control, feeling the hydraulic resistance. The crawler lurched forward a few feet, then stopped when he released the lever. Crude but functional. "Ready," he said. He drove toward the excavation site slowly, watching the distance markers Omar had set up. 200 meters, 100 meters, 75 meters. His suit display started flickering. Not dark yet, but unstable, showing random characters and corrupted data. His comm crackled with static. 50 meters. The crawler's electronic displays went dark. His suit screen scrambled completely, then went blank. But the manual controls still functioned. Hydraulic pressure didn't care about electromagnetic fields. 40 meters. 30. 20. He could see the excavation pit now, that dark circle in the grey regolith. The hatch open, the shaft descending into shadow. 10 meters. His helmet radio was pure static. He couldn't hear Omar or Riker or Helena, couldn't call for help if something went wrong. He was alone in the electromagnetic storm, piloting by sight and mechanical feel. 5 meters. He stopped the crawler at the pit's edge, positioned it carefully, extended the manipulator arm, the hydraulics responding to his lever inputs with agonizing slowness. The arm reached down into the pit. Calen couldn't see the recess plate from this angle. Had to work from memory, had to estimate the position based on his earlier observations. He moved the arm left, right, down slightly. There. He felt resistance. The manipulator's gripper had found something. He pressed, hard. The hydraulics whined with effort. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine responded. A vibration. Not through the ground this time. Through the air that didn't exist. Through space itself. Calen felt it in his chest, in his teeth, in the fluid of his inner ear. A low-frequency pulse that seemed to bypass his suit entirely and vibrate his body directly. The floor dust in the pit began to move. Impossible in vacuum, but it happened anyway. Tiny particles swirled, flowed, danced in patterns that suggested air currents or magnetic fields, or something else. Something that could exert force on matter. Without touching it, the vibration intensified. Calen's vision blurred. His balance wavered. The seismic monitors he'd left at the habitat were probably screaming warnings, though he couldn't hear them. Then colours appeared, not on the machine's surface, in the air, in space. Deep purples and blues that shouldn't exist in vacuum. They rippled and flowed around the cylinder like aurora borealis. Like oil on water, like something trying to exist in 3 dimensions when it naturally occupied more. And the hatch began to close, not because he'd pressed the plate, because the machine wanted it closed. The segments spiraled shut with the same smooth precision they'd opened with, sealing the chamber, hiding the darkness below. When the hatch fully closed, everything stopped. The vibration cut off instantly. The colours vanished. The dust settled. Complete stillness returned to the excavation site as if nothing had happened. But Calen's instruments told a different story. The exotic particle emissions had spiked dramatically during those 43 seconds. The electromagnetic field had pulsed with enough power to overload several sensors, and the seismic vibration had propagated through the lunar bedrock, reaching the surface, potentially detectable from orbit. The machine had responded, not to the manual pressure on the plate, to being touched, to being interfered with. It had closed the hatch itself, sealing away whatever waited in the darkness below. And it had sent a message. Calen didn't understand the message, couldn't interpret what the vibration and colours and dust movements meant. But he knew, deep in his gut, that it was communication. A response. An acknowledgement. The machine knew they were here, knew they'd opened it, knew they'd tried to close it, and it had taken control, completing the action on its own terms. He released the controls and sat in the darkened crawler, breathing hard, his heart hammering. His suit displays were still blank, his comm still static, but he was alive, unharmed. The machine had responded to his presence but hadn't attacked, hadn't defended itself aggressively. It had just closed the door. Calen engaged the drive lever and backed the crawler away from the pit. 50 meters, 75, 100. At 120 meters, his suit displays flickered back to life. At 150, his comm cleared. "Len, Calen, respond, are you—" "I'm here," he transmitted. His voice was hoarse. "I'm okay. The hatch is closed." Relief flooded through the comm. Helena's voice tight with worry. Omar asking for system status. Riker demanding a full report. But Calen barely heard them. He was staring back at the excavation site, at that sealed circle in the regolith, thinking about what had just happened. The machine had let him close the hatch. Could have stopped him. Could have kept it open. But it chose to seal itself away, to hide again, to return to dormancy. Or maybe not dormancy, maybe just waiting, preparing for the next phase. The eclipse was 26 hours away. They loaded the final equipment into the lander that evening. Everything essential was secured. Life support checked, navigation programmed, fuel reserves verified. They were ready to launch. Launch window was set for 6:23 p.m. the next day, March 27th. They'd lift off, reach orbit, rendezvous with the command module, and begin the journey home. Safe. Away from whatever the machine would do during the eclipse. Away from answers. Calen stood outside the habitat that night. His final night on the lunar surface, staring at the excavation site. The sealed hatch was invisible from this distance, just another patch of grey regolith in an ocean of grey regolith. Nothing to indicate that beneath it lay technology older than complex life on Earth. Earth hung in the black sky above him, blue and white and beautiful. Home. 7 billion people living their lives in complete ignorance of what waited here. What had been waiting here for billions of years. Should they be told? Did humanity deserve to know that they weren't alone? That something had visited their moon in the deep past? That technology beyond comprehension sat dormant just 3 days away? Or was ignorance better? Was it kinder to let people live their lives without the fear, without the existential dread that came from knowing you shared the universe with intelligence so advanced it could engineer across billions of years? Calen didn't know, didn't have answers, just questions that multiplied every time he thought about the machine. He went inside to sleep. They had an early start tomorrow, final checks before launch, last chance to collect any forgotten samples or data, last chance to change his mind about leaving. But he didn't sleep. Lay in his bag, listening to Omar's snoring, listening to the life support hum, thinking about the machine, about it waking up, about the eclipse coming, about what might happen when Earth and Moon and Sun align perfectly and the gravitational forces reach their maximum. At 3:17 a.m., his tablet chimed softly. Incoming message from Mission Control. Flagged urgent. He opened it, expecting mission updates or launch procedures. Instead, he found something that made his blood freeze. NASA's Deep Space Monitoring Network had detected unusual emissions from the South Pole-Aitken Basin, starting approximately 72 hours ago, March 21st, the day they'd first descended into the chamber. The emissions were faint at first, barely detectable above background noise. but they'd been increasing steadily ever since. And they weren't random electromagnetic noise. They were structured, organized, directional. The machine was transmitting. It had been transmitting for 3 days, and nobody had noticed until now because the signal was aimed away from Earth, aimed out into deep space, toward a specific region of the galaxy. NASA had traced the transmission, 900 light-years away, toward a relatively empty region in the constellation Aquarius. No bright stars, no obvious targets, just empty space. Except it wasn't empty 900 years ago. Light speed travel meant the signal was aimed at where something used to be, or might still be, or might be approaching from. Calen read the message 3 times, his hands shaking. The machine wasn't just waking up. It was calling, sending a signal into deep space, broadcasting something that NASA's analysts were still trying to decode, but that showed clear signs of being intentional communication. And it had been doing this since they first opened the chamber, since they first descended, since they first made contact with technology that had waited billions of years for this exact moment. They hadn't just discovered something. They'd activated something, triggered something, set in motion a process that had been waiting since before dinosaurs, before mammals, before anything on Earth had crawled out of the oceans. And in 26 hours during the eclipse, when the machine reached full power, that transmission would reach maximum strength. Earth's location was being broadcast to something 900 light-years away, and whatever had built the machine was about to learn that intelligent life had finally evolved in this solar system. Calen lay in his sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. They'd done exactly what the machine was designed to make them do. Found it, opened it, activated it, given it the final piece it needed to complete its purpose. They were supposed to find it. The machine was a test, or a trigger, or a beacon designed to activate only when intelligent life reached a specific level of development, when they were curious enough to investigate, capable enough to excavate, advanced enough to open sealed chambers on airless moons. That was the trigger condition. Not random discovery, not accidental activation, deliberate contact, physical investigation. Proof that the species on the nearby planet had evolved intelligence, curiosity, and the technology to reach out beyond their world. And humanity had just announced itself to whatever left the machine here billions of years ago. Calen wanted to wake Riker, wanted to share this information immediately, wanted to discuss what it meant and what they should do. But he didn't. He lay there in the darkness, thinking. If the machine had been transmitting for 3 days, then the damage was already done. The signal was already traveling through space at the speed of light, carrying whatever message it contained toward that empty region 900 light-years away. Nothing they could do would call it back. Nothing would stop it from reaching its destination. Unless the machine was using those exotic particles, the ones that moved faster than light, the ones that defied physics as humans understood it. If the signal was traveling faster than light, then the timeline collapsed. The message might arrive in decades instead of centuries, might already have been received, might already have triggered a response. Calen's mind spiraled through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. What if the machine wasn't calling its builders? What if it was calling something else? Some automated system, some defensive network, some response mechanism designed to investigate or claim or sterilize worlds where intelligence emerged. What if finding the machine was the worst mistake humanity had ever made? He must have dozed eventually because suddenly Omar was shaking him awake. Morning, time to prep for launch. "You look terrible," Omar said, studying his face. "Didn't sleep?" "Not much." Calen pulled himself out of the sleeping bag. His body felt heavy, exhausted. His mind felt worse. Spent the night thinking about the machine. "Yeah, well, in 12 hours we'll be in orbit and it won't be our problem anymore." Omar tried to sound confident, but Calen heard the uncertainty underneath. During breakfast, Calen showed the message to Riker. Watched the commander's face go pale as he read about the transmission, about the directional signal, about the 3 days of broadcasting that nobody had detected until now. "Why didn't Houston tell us immediately?" Riker demanded. "They probably just confirmed it," Calen said. "Deep space signals are hard to detect and harder to verify. They'd want to be absolutely certain before alarming us." "We're launching early," Riker decided. "Forget the 6:23 window. We launch as soon as we can get the lander ready. I want us off this surface and away from that thing before the eclipse begins." They worked frantically, cutting corners on procedures, skipping non-essential checks. The lander was ready by 10 a.m. The next optimal launch window was 11:47 a.m., more than 6 hours earlier than planned. "Everyone aboard," Riker ordered. "We're going home." They strapped into their seats, Calen in the rear compartment, watching through a small window as the lunar surface prepared to fall away. The excavation site was visible from this angle, a dark spot in the grey landscape, sealed, dormant, transmitting. Riker started the pre-launch sequence, systems check, engine prep, navigation alignment. Everything showed green, ready for ascent. At 11:46 a.m., 1 minute before launch, Calen's helmet display flickered. Not a malfunction. He recognized the pattern now. Data appearing, coordinates, stellar positions, right ascension and declination values marking specific locations in space. "It's happening again," he said quietly. "The machine is broadcasting into our suits." "Ignore it," Riker said. His hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. 30 seconds to engine start. The coordinates continued scrolling across Calen's display. Not random, organized, a sequence, multiple stellar locations, one after another, like a list or itinerary or navigation chart. 20 seconds. Helena's voice tight with realization. "It's not just broadcasting to one location. Look at the sequence. Multiple coordinates, multiple targets. It's sending to dozens of different points in space." 10 seconds. "How many?" Omar asked. "I count 43, Helena said. 43 different stellar coordinates, all within 1,000 light-years of Earth. 5 seconds. "It's not calling home," Calen whispered. The truth was obvious now, undeniable. "It's announcing us, broadcasting Earth's location to every outpost, every probe, every automated station in this region of the galaxy." 0. The engine fired. Acceleration pressed Calen into his seat as they climbed away from the surface. 1 kilometer altitude, 5 kilometers, 20. The lunar surface fell away below them, becoming a curved grey wasteland, becoming a sphere hanging in space. And somewhere down there the machine continued its work, transmitting, broadcasting, sending Earth's coordinates to dozens of potential listeners, scattered across hundreds of light years. Not a beacon calling one civilization. A broadcast announcing to all civilizations that this system now contained intelligent life, that Earth was ready, that humanity had reached the threshold. "Welcome to the galaxy. Here are our coordinates. Come find us." The thought was terrifying. They reached orbit 32 minutes later. The ascent engine cut off, leaving them in weightlessness. Through the windows, the moon curved below them, grey and cratered and ancient, home to secrets that humanity had stumbled upon without understanding the consequences. "Try to contact Houston," Riker ordered. "Emergency frequency. Tell them what we discovered." Omar worked the communication panel. The lander's emergency transmitter was more powerful than their suit radios, designed to punch through interference and reach Earth from anywhere in the lunar system. "Houston, this is Artemis 12, Omar transmitted. "We have successfully achieved orbit. Be advised the device is broadcasting to multiple locations. Repeat, we have confirmed the device is transmitting to at least 43 separate stellar coordinates within 1,000 light-years of Earth." The response took nearly 3 seconds, speed of light delay. Then a voice filled their helmets, calm but underlaid with tension. Artemis 12 Houston, confirm you said 43 separate coordinates? Confirmed, Omar replied. The machine displayed a sequence of stellar positions directly into our suit systems. 43 distinct locations, all within 1,000 light-year radius. The broadcast is not directed at a single target. It's announcing to multiple recipients. Another pause, longer this time. Calen could imagine mission control erupting into controlled chaos, scientists being called, military liaisons making secure calls, the administrator who'd recruited him staring at screens and understanding that everything had changed. Artemis 12, stand by for classified briefing. They floated in the cabin, waiting. Outside, Earth rose over the lunar horizon, that blue marble suspended in black. Home. 7 billion people who had no idea their existence had just been announced to dozens of potential listeners across hundreds of light years. The briefing came through 10 minutes later, secure channel, encrypted. The voice belonged to someone senior, someone whose decisions carried weight. Artemis 12, this is Houston Actual. We have confirmed your observations. The transmission is indeed multi-directional. Our analysis shows 43 separate stellar targets, average distance 800 light-years. The signal has been broadcasting continuously since March 21st at 11:23 a.m. Houston time. March 21st, day 6, the day they'd first drilled, the day they'd found the metal seam, the day everything started. The signal contains structured data, not random noise. Our analysts are working to decode it, but preliminary assessment suggests navigational information, stellar cartography, system dynamics, planetary characteristics, Earth's location, orbital mechanics, atmospheric composition, biological signatures. Everything needed to find this system and understand what waited here. The transmission intensity has been increasing logarithmically. It peaked 1 hour ago and is now stable at maximum output. We calculate the signal is strong enough to be detected by radio telescopes across several hundred light years, assuming the recipients have technology comparable to or exceeding our own. 1 hour ago, right around the time Calen had read the message, right around the time they'd decided to launch early. The machine had reached full power before the eclipse, had completed its primary function ahead of schedule, as if it knew they were planning to leave, as if it had accelerated its timeline to ensure the broadcast completed before they could interfere. Artemis 12, your orders are to proceed with mission conclusion. Rendezvous with command module. Return to Earth. All data and samples will be secured immediately upon landing. The mission is now classified at the highest level. You will not discuss these events with anyone outside designated personnel. Understood? Riker replied. His voice was flat, professional, but Calen could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight grip on the controls. One more thing, Houston Actual continued. The lunar eclipse will begin in 4 hours and 17 minutes. We want you away from lunar orbit before totality. Burn for trans-Earth injection is scheduled for 2:30 p.m. Do not, repeat, do not remain in lunar orbit during the eclipse. Why? Helena asked. What do you think will happen? A long pause, then, we don't know. But if the machine's activity is key to celestial alignments, we don't want your spacecraft anywhere near it during maximum alignment. Proceed to Earth immediately after rendezvous. The channel closed. They floated in silence, processing what they'd learned. The machine had been designed for this, built for this single purpose. Wait billions of years, survive across geological timescales, activate when intelligent life finally found it, then broadcast their location to dozens of listening posts scattered across the galaxy. An automated system. No intelligence required. just patient engineering and perfect execution of a program coded billions of years ago. And now, dozens of civilizations, or their automated systems, were receiving Earth's coordinates, learning about humanity, deciding what to do about this new intelligence that had just announced itself. How long? Omar asked quietly. If the signal is traveling at light speed, how long until it reaches the nearest target? Calen did the math in his head. The closest coordinates were around 500 light years away. If the signal travels at light speed, 500 years until it arrives. Another 500 years minimum for any response to return. 1,000 years total. Unless the signal is faster than light, Helena said. Those exotic particles, the ones that violated standard physics. If the machine can broadcast faster than light. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. If faster than light communication was possible, the timeline collapsed. The signal might arrive in decades, in years. The response might already be coming, crossing the vast distances between stars in ways that human physics couldn't explain. They might have 43 civilizations learning about Earth right now. This moment, today, receiving the coordinates and making decisions about what to do with this information. And humanity would have no warning, no time to prepare, no way to defend themselves if any of those civilizations decided Earth was a threat or a resource or an opportunity to be exploited. The rendezvous with the command module took 90 minutes. Precise orbital mechanics, careful maneuvering, docking procedures executed with mechanical efficiency. They transferred from the lander to the command module, bringing their samples and data storage but leaving the lander itself to eventually crash back to the lunar surface. By 2:15 p.m, they were ready for the trans-Earth injection burn, the engine that would accelerate them out of lunar orbit and send them on a trajectory toward home. Calen floated at a window, staring down at the moon one last time. From orbit, he couldn't see the South Pole-Aitken Basin, couldn't see the excavation site, couldn't see the chamber that had changed everything. But he knew it was there, knew the machine was down there, transmitting, broadcasting humanity's existence to things unknown, civilizations incomprehensible, intelligence that had been traveling the galaxy when Earth's oceans were still forming. All stations prepare for trans-Earth injection, Riker announced. Engine burn in 2 minutes. They strapped into their seats. Calen watched the countdown, watched the moon filling his window, watched Earth hanging beyond it, that blue jewel that suddenly seemed so fragile, so exposed, so vulnerable. At 2:30 p.m. exactly, the engine fired. The moon fell away behind them. They were going home, leaving the machine and its secrets behind, running from answers they weren't ready to face. But they weren't leaving it inactive, weren't leaving it dormant. They were leaving it broadcasting, announcing, calling, and somewhere out there something might be listening. The journey home took 3 days. 3 days of floating through space, watching Earth grow larger, thinking about what they'd found and what it meant. NASA kept them updated via encrypted channels. The transmission continued at maximum strength. Radio telescopes around the world were tracking it now, analysing it, trying to decode the full message. The data was complex, layered, more sophisticated than any human communication protocol. It contained stellar cartography, navigation charts showing Earth's position relative to nearby stars, orbital dynamics of the solar system, characteristics of each planet, special attention to Earth, atmospheric composition, surface temperature ranges, magnetic field strength, rotation period, and something else, biological markers, chemical signatures suggesting life, oxygen in the atmosphere, chlorophyll spectroscopy, indicators that this planet wasn't just habitable, but inhabited. The machine wasn't just announcing Earth's location, it was advertising, describing the planet in detail, explaining what made it special, what made it valuable, what made it worth visiting. On the second day, Helena made a disturbing discovery. she was reviewing the stellar coordinates that had appeared in their helmet displays, cross-referencing them with astronomical databases. "The coordinates," she said during a meal. They floated in the command module's main compartment, eating rehydrated food from pouches, trying to maintain some normalcy. "They're not random, they're organized, grouped." "Grouped how?" Riker asked. "By type. The first 17 coordinates all point to red dwarf stars, small, dim, long-lived stars where life could potentially evolve over billions of years. The next 12 point to sun-like yellow stars, similar mass and temperature to our own. The next 8 point to orange dwarfs, smaller than the sun, but larger than red dwarfs." "And the last 6, Omar asked. "Empty space," Helena said. "Or apparently empty. No visible stars within several light years of those coordinates, just darkness." "Unless something is there that we can't see," Calen said quietly. "Something that doesn't emit visible light. Something that hides. Something that doesn't want to be found until it's ready." That thought lingered. The machine had been designed to contact 43 specific locations, some of them obviously habitable systems, where life might evolve naturally, others targeting regions of space where nothing visible existed. What waited in those empty regions? Automated stations, hidden civilizations, sleeping armadas, observers that had been watching humanity for millennia, waiting for the signal that Earth had reached technological maturity. On the third day, March 30th, they began final approach to Earth. The planet filled their windows now, vast and beautiful, and terrifying in its vulnerability. Clouds swirled, oceans reflected sunlight, continents showed the green of life that had evolved here over billions of years, completely unaware that their existence had just been broadcast across hundreds of light years. "Entry interface in 4 hours, Riker announced. "After that, it's 30 minutes to splashdown. Then we debrief, we hand over our samples, and we never speak of this mission again." But Calen knew they would never stop speaking of it. Not to others, that was forbidden, but to themselves, in their thoughts, in their dreams, in the quiet moments when they looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there, learning about Earth, making decisions about what to do with that knowledge. They splashed down in the Pacific Ocean at 3:15 p.m. Pacific time, the same day the lunar eclipse had occurred. While they'd been travelling home, Earth had passed between the sun and moon, creating the perfect alignment the machine had been waiting for. Had it done something during the eclipse? Had the transmission changed? Intensified? Sent some final signal that completed its purpose? They would never know. By the time totality occurred, they were already halfway home, racing away from the moon at thousands of miles per hour. Recovery helicopters arrived within minutes. They were pulled from the ocean, capsule and all, loaded onto a cargo plane and flown to an undisclosed location. Not Kennedy Space Center, not Houston, somewhere else. Somewhere without cameras or reporters or public records. The debriefing began immediately and lasted 2 weeks. They were separated, questioned individually, asked to recount every detail dozens of times, their stories recorded and cross-referenced and analysed for inconsistencies. Scientists examined their samples with obsessive thoroughness. Engineers studied their equipment, looking for any contamination or artifacts from the electromagnetic interference. Intelligence analysts reviewed every second of video footage, every sensor reading, every scrap of data they'd collected. Calen was interviewed by people whose names he was never told. Military personnel in unmarked uniforms. Government officials with security clearances that exceeded anything he'd imagined existed. Scientists from agencies and organizations he'd never heard of, asking questions about isotope ratios and electromagnetic signatures and exotic particle physics. And through it all, one question dominated. What had they really found? The official conclusion, delivered by a panel of experts on the 14th day, was carefully worded. The machine was definitely extraterrestrial in origin. Definitely ancient beyond human comprehension. Definitely designed to transmit information about Earth's location when discovered by intelligent life. But whether the transmission was hostile, benign, or simply informational remained unknown. The signal had been broadcast to 43 locations across hundreds of light years. Whether anything existed at those locations to receive it was pure speculation. Whether any response would come was unknowable. The timeline was measured in centuries. Even if something received the transmission immediately and responded instantly, that response would take hundreds of years to return. Humanity had time. Time to advance their technology. Time to prepare. Time to hope that nothing was listening, or that if something was, it was friendly. Unless the signal travelled faster than light, unless the response was already coming, unless the centuries NASA predicted were actually decades or years or less. Nobody said that part out loud, but everyone thought it. The mission files were sealed under the highest national security protocols. The lunar samples were confiscated and stored in facilities that officially didn't exist. The crew was given new identities, new backgrounds, new lives that erased any connection to Artemis 12. The official story was simple. Artemis 12 had been a routine geological survey. The crew returned safely with valuable samples and data. Mission accomplished. Nothing unusual. Nothing extraordinary. The public never learned about the machine, about the chamber, about the transmission that announced Earth's location to dozens of potential listeners, about the test humanity had unknowingly taken and passed, triggering an automated system that had waited billions of years for this exact moment. The world kept spinning. People kept living their lives. And buried in classified archives, a small group of people knew the truth and carried it like a weight that would never lift. They were released on April 12th, 2025, given new documents, new addresses, new instructions to never contact each other, never speak of the mission, never do anything that might draw attention to what they'd discovered. Calen received a generous retirement package, enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. A house in Montana, far from cities with clear skies and a view of the stars. A simple life, a quiet life, a life where he could try to forget what he'd found on the moon. But he never forgot, couldn't forget. Every night he went outside and looked up, at the stars, at the moon hanging in the darkness, at the constellation Aquarius rising in the south, where 43 locations were receiving Earth's coordinates, learning about humanity, deciding what to do about this new intelligence that had just announced itself. And he waited. 6 months after returning to Earth, Calen was sitting on his porch at 3:17 in the morning when his phone rang. No caller ID, no name, just a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, then thought better of it and lifted the phone to his ear. Hello? Silence, just breathing, steady, calm, familiar. Omar? Calen asked quietly, and a pause, then a voice he hadn't heard in months. You still watching the sky? Every night. See anything? Not yet, you? Nothing, Omar said. But I've got access to better equipment than you do. Private telescopes, satellite time, friends who owe me favors. And the 43 coordinates the machine targeted. I've been monitoring them, all of them, looking for any sign of activity, any response to the transmission. Have you found anything? Omar was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Calen thought the connection had dropped. Then, 6 of them. The 6 coordinates, pointing to empty space. I've detected faint electromagnetic signatures. Very faint, barely above background noise, but they're there and they're new. They weren't present in archival data from before. March 25th. March 25th, day 10 of the mission. 2 days after they'd first descended into the chamber. 2 days after the machine started transmitting. What kind of signatures? Calen asked. His heart was racing. Power emissions, the kind you get from large-scale technology operating in deep space. Stations or ships or structures that are active but trying to stay hidden. They started appearing about a week after the transmission began, as if something out there received the signal and woke up. Calen closed his eyes. How far away? The closest one is about 300 light years, which means if they're responding to our transmission, if they received it and activated in response. Omar paused. Then the signal is traveling faster than light, much faster, maybe instantaneously. Have you told NASA? No, and I'm not going to. If I tell them, they'll shut down my access, lock me out of the telescopes, bury the information. They don't want anyone tracking this, don't want anyone confirming that something is out there and responding. Why are you telling me? Because, Omar said slowly, you were there. You touched the machine. You felt it wake up. And I think you deserve to know that we weren't wrong to be afraid. Something is out there. Multiple somethings. And they know about us now. What do we do? Nothing, Omar said. We're not in control anymore. We triggered something we don't understand. And now we wait to see what happens. Could be centuries before anything arrives. Could be decades. Could be tomorrow. You said the closest signatures are 300 light years away. Even if they could travel at light speed, that's 300 years. If they travel at light speed, Omar corrected, but if they can receive signals instantaneously, if they have faster than light technology that we can't even imagine, then distance doesn't mean what we think it means. 300 light years might be 300 days, or 300 weeks, or... He didn't finish. There's something else, Omar continued. The machine on the moon. It didn't stop transmitting. After the eclipse, it's still broadcasting. Continuous signal. NASA is monitoring it from orbit, though they're not telling anyone. The transmission is repeating now, sending the same data package over and over, like it's making sure the message gets through, making absolutely certain that everyone listening receives Earth's complete coordinates. When do they think it will stop? They don't know. Maybe never. Maybe it broadcasts forever, announcing Earth's location to anyone who passes within range. A permanent beacon saying, "Intelligent life here, come investigate." Calen thought about that. About the machine transmitting for years, for decades, for centuries, announcing humanity's existence to the galaxy, to whatever might be listening, to whatever might be traveling, to whatever might already be on its way. Omar, he said carefully, why did you really call? A long silence. Then, because they're recruiting for another mission. Artemis 17. Next year. Going back to the basin. They want to open the other chambers, the 17 other sites. They think there might be more machines, more information, maybe something that explains what the first machine does, or how to shut it down, or what's supposed to happen next. And they want you. They asked all of us. Riker said no. Helena said no. Another pause. I said yes, already signed the contract. We launch in 9 months. That's insane. We barely survived the first one. I know, but we need answers, Calen. We need to understand what we're dealing with, and those other chambers might have information we need. Technology we can study. Maybe even a way to stop the transmission before it's too late. Or, Calen said quietly, you'll activate 17 more machines, trigger 17 more transmissions, make everything worse. Maybe, Omar admitted, but doing nothing isn't working. The machine is broadcasting, something is responding, and we need to know what we're facing before it arrives. When do they want an answer from me? 3 days. They'll call you. If you say yes, training starts in January. Launch is next September. I'll think about it. I know you will, Omar said, and I know what you'll decide. Because you're like me. You can't walk away, can't ignore it, can't live with not knowing. How do you know what I'll decide? Because you're still watching the sky, Omar said simply, every night, looking for answers. And the only way to find them is to go back. The line went dead. Calen sat on his porch, phone still pressed to his ear, staring up at the stars, at Aquarius rising in the south, at those invisible points of darkness where something had woken up in response to humanity's announcement. 300 light years away, 6 locations, all showing signs of activity, all potentially responding to the machine's transmission. And Omar was right. Calen couldn't walk away. Couldn't spend the rest of his life in Montana, safe and ignorant, while the answers waited on the moon. While 17 other chambers sat sealed beneath ancient dust. While something might be traveling toward Earth, crossing distances that should be impossible, coming to investigate the new intelligence that had just revealed itself. He looked at the moon, at that grey sphere hanging in the darkness, hiding its secrets beneath billions of years of accumulated regolith, at the place where everything changed. 3 days later, when NASA called, he would say yes, would return to training, would board another rocket, would descend into another chamber and face whatever waited in those ancient depths. Because Omar was right about something else too. The machine wasn't just technology, wasn't just a beacon. It was a test, a threshold, a marker that separated species who stayed home from species who reached out to explore. And humanity had crossed that threshold, had proven they were curious enough, capable enough, brave enough to seek answers, even when those answers were terrifying. Now they had to live with the consequences. Calen stood and walked to the edge of his porch, looking up at the vast universe spread above him. Billions of stars, trillions of planets, and somewhere out there, at least 6 locations where something had woken up, where something knew about Earth, where something might already be making plans. The machine transmitted for 217 hours before stabilizing at maximum output. Then it kept transmitting, kept broadcasting, kept announcing Earth's location to anyone within range. That's 9 days of increasing transmission, followed by continuous broadcasts that would potentially last forever. 9 days for something 2.8 billion years old to announce humanity's existence to the galaxy. And now, all that's left is to wait and see who responds. The beacon has been activated, the message has been sent, and Earth has been marked on the galactic map as a world worth investigating. Whether that investigation will be peaceful or catastrophic, friendly or hostile, beneficial or devastating, remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: humanity is no longer alone in the universe. They never were. They just didn't know it until Dr. Calen Mirek descended into a chamber on the moon's far side and touched something that had been waiting billions of years for exactly that moment. The countdown has begun. Not in years or decades, but in the time it takes for something to cross 300 light years, using technology that makes light speed look slow. Maybe centuries, maybe decades, maybe less. Nobody knows. That's the horror of it. The not knowing, the endless uncertainty, the realization that every sunrise could be the last one, before everything changes forever. This is the truth they don't want you to know. The classified reality of the Artemis 12 mission. The discovery that announced humanity's presence to civilizations that might have been watching for billions of years, waiting for Earth's species to evolve enough to find their test and pass it, or fail it, depending on what comes next. The machine is still there, still transmitting, still broadcasting Earth's coordinates into the void. And somewhere in that void, something is listening.